Well, all right. Welcome back to As It Should Be. Paul Bertolino here in the world famous As It Should Be studios. And well, today I am doing another twin album cover video. Yeah, I did a few back in the day, a couple years ago, and then I kind of stopped doing them for a while. And then, I don't know, maybe about a month or two ago, I did another one. And, well, already I have collected enough to do. What is this, number 5? I don't know. I mean, maybe the number's in the title. I'm not really sure yet. But, yeah, well, I have a new one here. And, yeah, I mean, I have like maybe 8 or 10 entries. And, why don't we just get right into it, all right? But, you know, actually, before I get into it, I want to explain. I think I have on past videos, but not most of them. Well, I'm going to here. When people come into comments, sometimes people, I think, get a little confused about something. Now, my twin album cover idea isn't really about... It doesn't include album covers that are obvious homages. Homages, is that a word? Yeah, any album that's actually an obvious homage or an obvious takeoff. And I've used this example before, like the first Elvis album and the Clash London Calling. That's not a coincidence. That's not a sly ripoff that they hope nobody like. That's a reference. They're doing that on purpose. So something like that, we're not going to do that. You know, like Abbey Road and what's the Booker T album that's a takeoff on that cover. Like that doesn't count. So this is stuff that isn't actually necessarily supposed to be takeoffs of these covers. They just happen to be separated at birth. Okay, all of that said, now let's get on with this. I have so many notes here. I'm going to have to do the glasses even with the glare. All right. Okay. Now, first up, I have something that was submitted actually by a viewer. And this was, I think, this was in the comments of the last one I did. Well, this is Ruben Sane, or technically Ruben Sane 5539. Right? But I mean, really, you only have the 5539 because somebody else was already Ruben Sane online, right? So you have to add the number. So really, it's Ruben Sane. So he suggested Autographs, The Right Stuff from 1985, which I think is their second album. And now there are two cover variations of this. There's the red cover and the blue cover. Now, the red cover was designed by Jay Vigon, V-I-G-O-N. You know, it's one thing I found out from doing these twin album cover videos, apparently people who work in album cover design in whatever capacity, whether it's in design or photography or whatever, nobody with definite, like there are no Smiths and no Jones, okay, in this field of work. It's always people whose names I can't pronounce. I don't know why. And you would think V-I-G-O-N would be pretty simple, but I mean, is it Vigon? Is it? I don't know. Maybe it is Vigon. Maybe I just answered my own question. I don't know, but it might be Vigon. Let's assume it's Jay Vigon. Jay, if you're watching, correct me in the comments. Designed by Jay Vigon and Richard Serini, Seireeini. Am I pronouncing that correctly? I don't know. Richard Serini. Okay. Now, these guys, they did design and art direction work on a slew of albums in the first half of the 80s, like Devo's Shout. They did a bunch of David Lee Roth, like Crazy from the Heat, Eat 'Em and Smile, and Skyscraper. And Bon Jovi's 7800 Fahrenheit. Sammy Hagar's VOA. Lindsey Buckingham's Go Insane, the first Black and Blue album. And, of course, the previous Autograph album, Sign In Please. And, and they did many other albums or album covers separately, so but I'm not listing them here. But now the illustration was by Margot Nahas with another Nahas, however the hell you pronounce that. Margot Nahas, I guess, whose one true claim of fame apparently is that she did the illustration for the cover of Van Halen's 1984. Yeah, she did that painting. And and she also did Stevie Wonder's Journey Through the Secret Life of Plants. She did that piece of art. So who knew? The exact same person who did 1984 is the person who did Stevie Wonder's Journey Through the Secret Life of Plants. The more you know. Yeah, but so now the blue design, also designed by Jay Vigon and Richard Serini, but the illustration is by Hajime Sayarama. I don't think I did that bad on that one, but okay. Anyway, all of that information is to bring us to the fact that that album is very, very similar to an album that came out many years later. In 2001, Aerosmith put out Just Press Play, their worst album, and possibly their worst album. Well, one of their worst album covers. They have a lot of bad album covers. But now the illustration again on this one is Hajime. How did I pronounce it before? Surayama. That guy, yeah. Well, he actually did the illustration for this one as well. But he didn't do this illustration for Aerosmith. No. He did it for a 1985 comp LP of current hits like Rebel Yell by Billy Idol and Relax, Frankie Goes to Hollywood, stuff like that was released in Argentina, called Video Sound, which was released in 1985, the same exact year that the Autograph album came out. And yeah, so, two of these are actually the same exact, Aerosmith just completely stole the image outright. They just took that image and just put new text over it and went, here you go, here's a new album cover. In fact, I talked about that. If you saw our Aerosmith album ranking that Crystal and Tommy and I did a little while back, we discussed this, or I mentioned it. But so there you go. There's the whole history of that. Well, as much as I have here in my notes, and 3 really terrible album covers to look alike. All right, so next up I have 2 albums by 2 great bands, and 2 wildly different great bands. First up we have Commodores from 1975. I believe their 3rd album, Moving On, but their 2nd album of 1975, and what's it, Caught in the Act, I believe, is the first one of the year. But yeah, Moving On, with the cover you see here, and the art direction for this was done by Frank Mulvey. I think I can actually pronounce this correctly. Mulvey, M-L-U, or M-U-L-V-E-Y, Mulvey, right? That's simple enough. Even I can pronounce that. The cover illustration was done by Peter Palombi. Okay. Well, anyway, there was an album that came out in 2012 that bears a striking resemblance to this one, and that is Van Halen's A Different Kind of Truth. Yes, their final album, the big reunion album with David Lee Roth, and their last album outright. Now, this cover was done by Smog Design, which is just, sort of a firm. It's a boutique design firm out of Silver Lake in LA. And, they did very, very 2000s kind of stuff, because that was kind of their heyday, I think. They mostly do boring stuff like Rod Stewart's American Songbook album covers, stuff like that. With a lot of basic text placed over head and shoulder shots, those kind of album covers, a ton of them. I looked up all the covers that they did, and it's just a lot of that kind of crap. But the Van Halen album is by far the most interesting thing on their resume, as far as I can tell. But I don't know. I think maybe Dave might have had something to do with this. I suspect, because Dave's a big Soul fan. I mean, the last time I saw Van Halen here in the city of New York City at MSG, the opening band was Kool and the Gang, and that was Dave. I mean, Dave's the one who brought those in. I'm sure Eddie was probably annoyed by it, but Dave's the one who brought those guys in because he loves that kind of stuff. So surely he loves the Commodores, and surely he knows this album and this cover. So I don't know. If there's any sort of any nicking going on, I'm going to guess it's on the part of Dave. But yeah, strikingly similar album covers. And actually, when I went to Wikipedia to try to find a little bit of information, because sometimes I go to Discogs looking, because you can find the information that's printed inside the album covers where they tell you who the was the designer and who was the photographer. Sometimes it's not there, so I'll go to Wikipedia trying to find the information. And when I went over to Wikipedia, I noticed that in the Wikipedia entry for the Commodores album, there actually is a bit where they say that people have compared the 2 album covers. I mean, how could you not? Well, anyway, there you go. Commodores and Van Halen. Okay, so next up I have, I have 2 Jim albums. Jim. Oh, Jim. These are albums that you love, and as it should be. Anyway, first up we have, and this one I have handy, The Flame. Yeah, The Flame from 1970. And of course, The Flame, this is a Beach Boys related album. It's actually on Brother Records, and we have Blondie Chaplin here, and Ricky Pitar, both of whom were actually in the Beach Boys in the early to mid 70s, right? Well, this is when they first sort of became associated with the Beach Boys, and the Beach Boys put an album out by their band, The Flame, South African band who had a number of albums out before, but they had been called The Flames. They were actually The Flames, and they became The Flame when they put out this album. Excellent album. Total Abbey Road, just like Badfinger-ish, just like, yeah, great album. With the poster. And the other album, well, actually, what do I have here? I should read my notes. The cover was designed by the Dan Quest Studio, and, well, they're out of Nashville, and they did a few James Brown covers, like Popcorn and Superbad, but they mostly did a lot of boring conservative-looking cover designs and a lot of B-level country records. Okay, so that's who did the Flame album. Well, the next album, the album that looks strikingly similar, an album that I do not have here, and actually, I don't have this album at all. I don't even have it in the world-famous As It Should Be archives. I just don't have this album. Sorry, Jim. Jim has this one. Oh boy, does Jim have this one. Well, this is the Raspberries. He probably already knew where I was going with this. Starting Over, their 1974 album. Yeah, now the design and photography for this was for Richard DeLalo. And now it's actually the same Richard DeLalo who wrote The Longest Cocktail Party and the screenplay for Bad Boys. That Richard DeLalo, whose name I'm probably mispronouncing. But he was involved in a few very significant album covers like Badfinger's Straight Up and No Dice, Janis Joplin's Cosmic Blues, and John and Yoko's wedding album. Yeah, he's, probably photography in a lot of cases, design in others. I don't have the specifics here, but yeah. But he did numerous other albums that I didn't even bother to list because there's a lot of them. But yeah, so the Flame and Raspberries, separated at birth. Alright, so next up, I have another album that I actually have here, but I don't have the other one. And you'll find out why when I say what it is. But, well, first up we have Tavares with Hardcore Poetry. Yeah, the second Tavares album, as you can see here, number 2. Absolutely great album. Absolutely great album. It was, the art direction was done by Roy Kohara, whom I believe has actually come up before on one of my Twin album covers videos. He worked on albums like the Raspberries' Fresh album, Lennon's Walls and Bridges, Ringo's Goodnight Vienna, George Harrison's Extra Texture. Yeah, he had a lot of 70s Beatles ties. And the Beach Boys' Endless Summer. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned that in one of these videos, but this album, though, was produced by Brian Potter and Dennis Lampert, who did a whole slew of great soul albums in the early to mid 70s. Great albums, and a lot of really great underrated albums in the 70s. And like Evie Sands, A State of Mind. Yeah, this one's, what is this, from 74, right? Yeah, it's the 74 album. Evie's amazing, wildly underrated second album. What does this have to do with what I'm talking about? Well, just the Dennis Lampert and Brian Potter connection, but I take any and all, I've said this before, I take any and all opportunity to mention Evie. Buy this album. Anyway. So, now, you know what I gotta point out, though? So, I've always been really annoyed. Now, this is a pretty kind of a dorky album. I don't know, this is kind of a cheesy album cover. But I've always been really annoyed by these white patches here in the background and the lettering. Shouldn't that have been filled in black? I mean, I'm pretty sure they did that because of the shading, but, something's got to lose, and I'm thinking that losing the shading so there isn't just random white back there that doesn't make any sense would be better, but I don't know. Here I am telling these professionals how to do their work, but I don't know. What do you think? Anyway, poor design, great album. But anyway, what's the Twin album cover? The Twin album cover is Dr. Hook. Dr. Hook with Making Love and Music from 1977. That's why I don't have the other album, because it's Dr. Hook, and anybody who watches this channel knows that I hate Dr. Hook. You can hear Crystal now sing Hot Dog Water. Yeah. Anyway, well, Making Love and Music from 1977. Yeah, I mean, this is probably, I don't know, this could be possibly the most overtly Twin of any pair of album covers I have. Now, the cover design was done by Bonnie Phippen. Phippen, Phippn. I think I probably have that correct. And, well, the art direction was done by Roy Kohara, who actually is the very same guy who did this. Now, and you would think, well, okay, evidently he's a one-trick pony and he only has one design up his sleeve. Well, actually, that's not at all true. If you go and look him up on Discogs and look at all the stuff that he's done a lot of serious-ass work. So I don't know. I don't know what the reason is behind these two album covers being identical, but, I mean, I don't know. Maybe Roy did them in the same day? I don't know. Anyway. Okay, so up next is another viewer-submitted entry, and that was submitted by viewer Sean Jens. Sean Jens 945. I think that may have been maybe in the previous video as well, the previous Twin album covers video, possibly. It wasn't that long ago. Anyway, well, he suggested Flamingos with Plastic Jewels from 1995. Now, I think there are a lot of people, if they know their their mid-90s pop and indie kind of type records, they know exactly where I'm going with this. The Twin album cover that goes with this, Fountains of Wayne, with, I don't have a title listed here. Is it a self-titled? I didn't even write that, but it's from 1996, the 1996 Fountains of Wayne album. It's literally exactly the same thing, kind of like the Aerosmith and video sound or whatever it's called album cover. It's exact same image, but they just kind of changed the way it's presented, a little different text and slightly different design. Okay, so I have a little blurb here that I'm going to read that I got from the internet that basically explains the whole damn thing. So there's no mystery here behind this one. Okay, now the photo was shot by Nick Waplington. All right. Now, the Flamingos album came out in the U.S. just 2 weeks before the Fountains of Wayne album. And according to Chris Collingwood of Fountains of Wayne, he says, this English photographer licensed the photograph to both bands. Worse than that, he was directly asked by us if he had licensed it to anybody else, and he said no. So basically, the guy's a complete asshole. So there you go. Here's an instance where, yeah, they're actually, well, somebody at least is totally guilty. All right, well, there you go. Okay, next up I have a fun little pair. Now, this particular pair up is kind of stretching it. It's definitely not as dead on as the stuff I've talked about so far. But one definitely reminds me of the other. Every time I see this first one, I think of the next one. And, well, first up, from 1981, The Village People with Renaissance. Yeah. Now, this came about, actually, because of the Vinyl Community Gunkles. The great Vinyl Community Gunkles. Watch their channel. They are well worth your time, your energy, and the money it takes to subscribe. No, there's no money. But, yeah. Well, anyway, they recently did a video where they reviewed this Village People Renaissance album, and I'm watching the video, and I'm being reminded of this whole thing. Like, I'm looking at the cover, I'm going, oh yeah, this always reminded me of something, and then ding, I remembered. So, we'll get to that. Now, for this album, the art direction and design was done by Michelle Hart and Phyllis Chotin, Chotin, is that how you pronounce that? Of Media Arts. Okay, now they have only 8 album covers listed to their credit on Discogs, and they're all from 1981, 1982, so I guess this was a very short-lived design firm. Now, the most notable thing of those 8 being, or the most notable things, I guess, being America's View from the Ground and Dolly Parton's Heartbreak Express and her 1982 Greatest Hits album. And of course, their masterpiece, this Village People Renaissance record from 1981. Now, the photography was by J. Stephen Arnold, and yeah, that's all the information I have on this cover. But when I finally realized what album cover this always reminded me of. Oh No, It's Devo. Yeah, Oh No, It's Devo from 1982. Okay, and the cover photography for this was done by Eric Arneson, and the graphic concept by Devo Incorporated. So, I mean, I guess Mark Mothersbaugh and all those guys came up with this idea. I'd like to think they probably weren't. They probably didn't have the Village People album in mind when they did this. Or if they did, then maybe it was an inside joke. I don't know. But anyway, the art direction was done by Rick Serini. Remember Rick Serini when I couldn't pronounce his name before when I was talking about the Autograph album? Yeah, he did that one too. And, yeah, so there you go. Oh No, It's Devo and Village People's Renaissance. Okay, next up I have another viewer submitted suggestion, okay? Charlotte Gough. Am I pronouncing your name correctly? Gough. Gough. I think it's Gough. There's a street in San Francisco in the Haight, Gough, and that is pronounced Gough. So I'm taking that as a hint that maybe that's how you pronounce your name. But I don't know. Let me know in the comments if I got that right. Anyway, so Charlotte Gough, she mentioned in our TV LPs video in the comments, she mentioned, because I was talking about this album, John Travolta, Can't Let You Go from 1977, which is his second album. I guess he only has two. So his second and final album. Now, the photography and the design was by Norman Seeff, whose name I'm probably mispronouncing, Seeff, Seeff, I guess, or Safe, I don't know. Now, he also did the design of the photography for Kiss's Hotter Than Hell album, and a gazillion other 70s albums, which are too numerous to mention. I just decided to single out Kiss because, well, because Kiss! Okay. Now, she mentioned that album cover had little in common with a certain second album by another artist. Yeah. Prince, from 1979, with his self-titled second album. Yeah, well, the album design for that was done by Lynn Barron and George Chicon of RIA Images, and the photography was done by Jurgen Reich, probably mispronouncing it. But anyway, yeah, I was surprised when I looked up the info on this that all of this wasn't done by Prince. Shouldn't album design and photography also be by Prince? I don't know, but she was right. There are certain striking similarities to this, and who knew? All right, so I have yet another commenter submission. All right, now this one's old. This one goes way back. This one I kind of had sitting, in the vault, waiting to come out later on. I don't know why I didn't use this one before, but I'm using it now. A guy named Bert Nijgen, talk about a name I can't pronounce. Okay, you know what? It's this. That's his name. Come on. Admit it. Even you can't pronounce that. Okay, well, that guy. Well, Bert. Anyway, Bert, who probably doesn't even watch these videos anymore, because this was a long-ass time ago when he suggested this, but he gave me John Phillips. John Phillips is 1970. Well, it's self-titled, but it's also known as John the Wolf King of L.A. So we could go either or on that title-wise, but now the design, photography, the design and the photography is by Tom Gundelfinger. Gundelfinger? All right, who did he did a lot of psych and psych-influenced album covers from the late 60s, like the H.P. Lovecraft 2 album, Steppenwolf self-titled, and Steppenwolf 7, Spanky and Our Gang's Anything You Choose, The Grassroots, Leaving It All Behind, and Conception by Frantic. So he did all that kind of stuff in the late 60s, but most notably, and possibly what he's most known for, is that he shot the cover photo for Deja Vu. Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young's Deja Vu. Yeah, he shot that cover. So, well, Bert pointed out that, this album cover bears a striking resemblance to another one, or the next one actually bears a striking resemblance to this one, I guess, because we're going chronologically here. From 1976, we have Desire by Bob Dylan. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of the same thing, isn't it? Well, okay, so the Dylan album, the cover photography was by Ken Reagan, who did a lot of album covers for Dylan in the mid-'70s through the '80s, a lot of the photography for those albums. And, the design was done by John Berg, who, as art director for Columbia CBS, shot the cover photo for John Wesley Harding. And he worked on numerous other Columbia releases by Chicago, Sly and the Family Stone, the list goes on there. But yeah, I mean, none of the same people worked on this, right? But John Phillips and Bob Dylan. Different fingers, same fist. Okay, so next up I have something that's... two of these are pretty close, but one of them's a major stretch. But, okay. First, these two I actually have both of these here. Well, all three of these. I have all three of these, if you can believe it. The Beatles with Rubber Soul. Yeah, the Beatles with Rubber Soul. Now, of course, it's the Beatles, and there are because there's a gazillion album covers out there of people trying to imitate Beatles album covers. You know, how many Abbey Roads do you have? How many Sgt. Peppers? You know, hell, the White Album, for Christ's sake, how many people have done their own take on that? And you know, some of them were on purpose, but some of them, a lot of things that were just... well, okay, like in this case, this is not an homage. It's just sort of somebody... well, anyway. Kaleidoscope with Tangerine Dream. Yeah, I mean... come on. That's, you know... 65, 67. Okay. Now, the Beatles cover, the photography was done by Robert Freeman, who did all of the Beatles covers from With the Beatles up to Rubber Soul. But the Rubber Soul lettering, the classic, the trend-setting Rubber Soul lettering was done by Charles Front. Yeah, I mean, he basically single-handedly started the whole psychedelic lettering design of the mid-60s. I mean, there may have been other albums that came before this that had maybe kind of swirly, rounded sort of letters. You know, like maybe there's some Chet Atkins record from 1958 or something. I don't know, but you know. But I'm sorry, Jefferson Airplane and Grateful Dead on their posters weren't getting that from there. They got that from here. Let's be real here. So you know that basically that single-handedly I think started that whole trend. And, you know, you have the Kaleidoscope album cover. I mean, you know, that is undeniable. Very clearly they got that from Rubber Soul, but it's not an homage. It's not a reference. They're not referencing Rubber Soul. They're just trying to get in on the action. Okay? Now, I have one other here that's, like I said, this is a major stretch, but I always think of the Rubber Soul album every time I see this. The first ABBA album. Yeah, Ring Ring. I mean, you know, maybe it's a little bit, it's the background, it's the colors, it's, you know, this is obviously not in any way influenced by that or a takeoff on it or whatever, but there's just something about, you know, the trees in the background, the four of them, you know, maybe the orange lettering, I guess, I don't know. I just always think of Rubber Soul when I see this. But, again, major stretch. Okay, a couple more here. Before I get to my last one, I have sort of bonus add-ons to previous submissions on previous videos, on previous Twin album covers videos. Now, my friend John Meeks, who I mention sometimes in these videos, shout out to John Meeks and Terry, you guys who both watch all the time and send me nice little messages about my videos. I appreciate that. I've known John since the 80s. I've known John since, like, what, 1985, 86, something like that? Yeah, forever. And, well, he came in and he mentioned there was a previous episode where I did Orleans and Bar-Kays. I'll show the album covers here. Yeah, the Orleans and Bar-Kays albums. Well, John Meeks came in and said, well, you know what? You could add to that Pablo Cruz with Lifeline from 1976. Boy, is he not wrong. Yeah. We'll put that one in there, too. So there you go. There's an add-on for you. And I have another add-on from another friend, Jim Laspisa. Jim Laspisa, who also watches, you know, well, all right, Jim. And, well, he pointed out on a previous episode when I put Earth, Wind & Fire's That's the Way of the World together with Chicago's Hot Streets. See those here? Well, he said, well, you know what? You can add to that one Edgar Winter Group's Shock Treatment from 1974. And yeah, I mean, you know, it's not as dead on as the Chicago and EWF albums are, but yeah, you could put that in there. I mean, really, if you want to really get in there, you could even add Ike and Tina's Feel Good. Is that the name of the album? Yeah, Feel Good. Ike and Tina's Feel Good. You could add that to it too. So the list goes on. Okay, so this brings us to my last entry on this collection here, and this is kind of like, have you ever watched a fireworks display? You sit through the whole thing, and then there's the big finish, you know. Yeah, well, this is going to be a big fireworks display finish, because I have, what do I have here? 7 albums with essentially, for all intents and purposes, the same album cover, okay? And it's not a bunch of people doing the White Album or anything like that. No. Now, there's so many of them here. I'm not going to go into all the details about each of them. I'm just going to give you the names and show you the albums, and then we're all gonna go home. Okay, all right. So first up, I have the Mystic Moods Orchestra with English Muffins from 1971. Okay. Then we have Wild Cherry with their self-titled album from 1976. I believe this is the one with Play That Funky Music, White Boy. Yeah. Next up, we have Instant Funk with Get Down with the Philly Jump from 1976 also. Nocturna. Yeah, the Nocturna soundtrack from 1979. Shall I continue? Juicy with their self-titled album from 1982. Sammy Hagar with Three Lock Box from 1982. And a more recent album, Gorilla Pulp, Heavy Lips from 2017. Okay, talk about a recent album. And last, and most definitely not least, I have an album that just came out this past week, on the 12th of September. From this year, from 2025, I have Play On, a Raspberries tribute. Yeah, yes, the Raspberries tribute album that just came out. Now, this features tracks by Rick Springfield, the Lemon Twigs, Vicky and Debbie Peterson, Bird Streets, which features my friend and neighbor John Broder. Bird Streets basically is John Broder. And, yeah, Lou Gramm, Cherie Currie, Evan Stanley. Yeah, and Evan Stanley, of course, I'm sure Evan Stanley probably was sort of indoctrinated into Raspberries fandom because his father, Paul Stanley, is a huge Raspberries fan. And, anyway, Evan Stanley's on this. And my friend Jim, who I mention all the time in these videos, and I just mentioned him a little while ago. Now, he plays on Darian Sahanaja's version of On the Beach and on Rob... I'm probably going to mispronounce this name. I can't pronounce shit. Okay, I'm American. Americans can't pronounce stuff. Rob Bonfiglio. Maybe I got that right. He's on Rob Bonfiglio's version of Rose-Colored Glasses. Yeah, Jim plays drums, and he played on 2 tracks on this album, and he is a major Raspberries fan, and I know he's very, very proud not only to be on this album, but to be on this album with all these other great artists, because Jim is a great musician, and a great fan, and a great friend, and there you go. And he's now added to the whole list of people who have Lips album covers. What more could you want? Alright, so there you go. That is my latest installment in the Twin album cover series. And, yeah, hopefully, maybe you have some of those albums. I don't know. Or maybe you have some add-ons that you can mention down there. And the Lips album covers, I'm sure that goes on and on and on. I mean, I actually did leave some out. I mean, it's just, there's 1,000 of those. But anyway, thank you for watching, and thank you for subscribing if you have, and if you haven't, maybe consider subscribing, and if you do, click the little bell for notifications, but be sure and come back on Thursday this week. Crystal Durant and Tommy Von Voigt are going to be back here in the world-famous As It Should Be Studios, and we are going to be ranking the Black Sabbath albums, but the Ozzy-only Black Sabbath albums. That's right, the original run. We're going to throw 13 in there because it's an Ozzy album, and of course, in a belated tribute to the great Ozzy, and yeah, so maybe come back and check that out. Should be fun. Hopefully we'll see you then.